Shark Stream is one of several rivers in Vespucci where sharks can be found, specifically bull sharks. They swim up the Great River and hunt in some of the lakes across the continent, even going so far to swim up smaller rivers to reach new hunting grounds. Shark Stream is one of the rivers, connecting Lake Polaris to the Great River. Lake Polaris is in one of the outlying counties of Swamp City, with both Catfish Creek and Shark Stream coming off of the lake. While nowadays Lake Polaris is a beautiful spot to enjoy boating, fishing, and even camping, back during the twilight years of the Great War, Lake Polaris was a hub where the Empire shipped troops down Shark Stream to fight along the riverfront. For 1 month in 2703, there was a massive loss of troops heading down Shark Stream. Every ship would lose troops during a single 20-kilometer stretch of the river. Anyone who was left out on the deck for watch duty would disappear the next morning. While no bodies were ever recovered, numerous dog tags with the soldiers' names would be found. The disappearances began mysteriously in March of 2703, and by April of the same year, they had stopped. Officially, there is no known reason why. However, one of the last ships to have a disappearance, the HMS Turtle, has a story that may explain why it is. The story is an oral tale that has been passed down from the days of the Great War to the modern day. The story was collected from several members of the HMS Turtle, including the captain of the HMS Turtle, who back in 2703 was an auxiliary working on the deck to work off his sentence. The story collected is assembled into a working narrative the best I can. However, there may be some diffusion across the years or new details added or taken away as time went on. Despite the name, Shark Stream was definitely a deep water channel rather than a naturally occurring stream. Some construction company that built the deep water channel thought the name made it sound more natural and less artificial than calling it the deep water channel. Still, at the time, I had served for 6 years for the Great War effort, and I was a year away from mustering out from being an auxiliary. Unlike others of my rank, I was willing to stay with the military once my service was done. I felt that I had earned my place in the military, and unlike all of my prospects back home, I felt like I had a future with the military. All I had to do was stay alive. By the time we were being shipped out of Lake Polaris, we all had heard the rumors of what was happening, and there were a few rules that people created that were supposed to keep us safer. Avoid that stretch of the stream until daylight hours. Don't let anyone outside after dark. And finally, don't trust the stream. While I'm sure those rules kept some people safe, it couldn't work for us. The war effort would require us to keep going through the night, and even then, we left Lake Polaris too late. There was some kind of problem with the rivets. They needed more rivets on the front, so the ship was loaded and then overloaded with rivets. The crew's quarters and even the decks were loaded with crates upon crates of rivets, which took all day to load. And when we left, there was a real concern that the ship may be overladen, but we had to keep going. In those days, if you were too heavy to float, you were still expected to swim. We lost a lot of good ships that way, and a lot more good people, but the war was so important that we were willing to kill as many of our own people as it took, as long as it took out one of the enemy. It must have been near midnight when we arrived near the stretch of the stream. I remember seeing the moon glint off of the water as we passed over those waters. We were hopeful that we were going to be the lucky ones to escape through unscathed. We were not. The crew heard singing in the air, some of the most beautiful melodic music that has ever been heard, music that the crew went to the starboard side of the ship to better hear the music. Beautiful music that appealed to something deep inside of you, music that promised you what is in your deepest heart. A song that serenaded your soul and promised you more than your darkest desire. A promise to fulfill what you want but are far too scared to ask. The desires that you keep hidden inside of you, so far down that you could never admit it to anyone, not even yourself. The song promised to understand you, and it promised to give you what you wanted. All you had to do was get closer. A song that promised you the world and more, and all you had to do was get closer. The sailors were walking overboard to get closer to the song's source. I was getting closer to the edge when I noticed the source of the song. A large figure swimming alongside the ship. She must have been massive, since she was almost as long as a bull shark. Her tail swam side to side like a fish. Her tail didn't have any scales like in the stories. Instead, they looked like it was the same denticles as sharp skin. Her torso was vaguely humanoid. It had 2 arms coated in blood, and around her necklace were numerous massive pearls strung together, with a necklace made from a rusty chain. Her hair was long and resembled the whiskers of a catfish. Her eyes were black and devoid of emotion, and her mouth was wide and smiling, a smile so wide that you hardly cared about the fact that her mouth was full of blood. Blood she was careful not to drop in the water to avoid attracting the attention of the other sharks in the water. She sang even as bodies fell around her. She sang as she chopped down on the sailors' bodies who swam up to her, eager to be eaten, torn apart, and consumed with a smile on their faces. The song promising them everything. Even as I gripped the railing and I saw what was happening, the danger didn't feel real to me. It felt like was watching it happen to someone else, and I was certain that all I had to do was fall into the water, and she would give me everything. After all, how could anyone with such a beautiful song possibly be dangerous? I was vaguely aware of one of the injured sailors plunging over the railing into the water below. When the sailor fell, the singing stopped, and I realized that I was alone on the deck as the siren below screamed. Her song was gone, now her voice sounded wicked and evil. A scream that haunted me in my dreams and still haunts me to this day. The blood of the injured sailor attracted the bull sharks to the mermaid and triggered a feeding frenzy. She tried to fight off the sharks, but still their jaws tore into her, and the more she bled, the more the sharks fed. In mere minutes there was nothing left in the river except blood. I woke the captain and told her everything. She didn't believe me, but she did believe something happened that night to cause so many deaths. But she just marked it in her log, and we kept moving the rivets west. While tales of sirens are hardly new, a tale of a siren in freshwater is practically unheard of. It may have been possible that the siren followed the bull sharks and made her way to Swamp City. Considering the fact that there hasn't been another incident like it since, it is safe to assume that the siren is no longer a threat. Still, there does lie the possibility that the siren story is just a story. The Great War was such a chaotic time that supernatural stories were happening almost everywhere. There are tales of people fleeing into lakes and being hidden underneath the lake by something living in the lake, or how there were statues of angels in churches that protected those who came in, or even tales of werewolves fighting alongside soldiers against the Goths. Still, even if it is proven to be false, it is a fascinating story of our world, and one that gives a more complete picture of the esoteric and exoteric worlds. Oftentimes, what is hidden is only seen in glimpses and shared in stories, and legends and myths are a part of the exoteric world to help explain why some of the strange things happen in our world. Although sometimes what is happening in our world is far stranger than any story that could be made up around a campfire. However, something that should be known is that even all these years later, the captain still remembers that song, and he still seeks out the siren on the river. Even knowing the dangers, he still fell in love with that song, and all of these years later, if he finds that siren again, he will plunge over the water to get his deepest desire. That is why the captain still works the same ship along the same route in hope that he may find that same song. Even all of these years later, he still seeks long after he should be retired. That is how deep the hooks of the siren song plunges into the heart. Even if the siren isn't a siren, anything that can do that to the heart of a man should be feared.